nothing compared to like what was there before Crisis. That was really big. Okay, it took some management, and a lot of the writers didn't want to do the
Petey,
lift.
Petey just found the record. Should we open up as a regular thing or just start talking just out of the blue?
You won't. You just want to go pile through it, and then you're gonna have no energy to do this again. That's the point thing you want to make. Just do it. But I'm like saying my point. My issue was that I just argued that. Well, I argued it was too cosmic. All that stuff should have been in the Spider-Man thing. But
no, I like the Spider-Man thing. I think was specific. I'm okay with the Spider-Man limiting it to Spider-Man. But when you start talking about bringing characters from different, like the whole Marvel universe is now different places and different things, I don't really like that. I don't really like the fact the same thing goes for DC. Why are they both using the same playbook? Marvel's been pushing this whole
Marvel's using DC's playbook. It's not them using the same playbook.
But they haven't done it in the movies yet. They haven't done it in the movies yet.
There's no difference. They just take the actors from the other movies and put them in there. That was a novel idea. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we use these actors from the other movies and put them in this thing, which they did, and they're like, this is what people do. Like, no, you stole the idea. They don't know that they did it in the movie. It's a big difference. We're spending all this money on them to go in a movie. That's like totally new concept.
And Marvel's been doing that for years. Marvel's the house of ideas. They run out of ideas. They say, hey, get me that telescope. Let's see what DC's doing.
Dude, you got to stop that. How many times I keep telling you about that?
Now
that
DC's on the other side.
in.
Now DC's on the other side of the country, so they got to get the Hubble, but they still do it.
the Hubble peers out to space, my friend. Okay.
Well, you're going to need something to get to see the other side of the country.
Even their earliest successes, even the aspect of doing the Fantastic Four came from what DC was doing. So it's like, as novel as they've been, they've always sort of whatever's big, just flood the market, do whatever people like, and that's it's criminal because there's only really Counter Earth and Days of the Future Past. Now we're like, we'll create a multiverse and explain why all these. It was just a cute idea in the DC Crisis. Just fun to say, hey, there was an actual Kingdom Come, which was separate from the regular reality. So they put that guy in there. And then there's, okay, we can do small, but we can put this guy here. So it's like, let's play this up. But we're not making any sense to it and saying, okay, these are different. In the comic book sense, it makes sense. Like, yeah, Kingdom Come, we got this guy as a Kingdom Come sort of thing. They're like, no, all those movies, that's our multiverse. So the next Spider-Man will be a new multiverse. And the next one is like, no, I can't. I'm happy that in one instance, there's freaking George Reeves as Superman, and in another instance, there's Christopher Reeve as Superman. And they're not different realities.
They're supposed to be honest, that type of stuff is supposed to be one time done. One time done. So you come over, you can do that stuff. You can come, okay, we want to do the Batman thing. We're going to have Michael Keaton in there, have this cat over here. Maybe we can convince George Clooney to come back. That's supposed to be one shot. It's not supposed to be, okay, you're not supposed to go full nerd with it and say, okay, that's what exists now. There's a spiraling multiverse out there because you guys have a hard time enough. I'm sick about Hollywood. You guys have a hard time enough with just the continuity of one particular property.
And that I have to agree with you there, Kyle. And that's my fear is that, by using this whole multiverse concept, and again, I'm leaving Spider-Man out. You guys have to leave it out because I like that concept. But in all the others, it's going to start diluting the specific brands by bringing up every single Batman incarnation there is, that bringing, just mixing things up. And I think it was going to get the consumers confused as to what's actually happening. Like you said, it's a cute concept. I got it. Probably one off, two off, but then you need to go. It can't become the bedrock of the whole thing, because people want stories and they want stories that they can follow. Something they can come in and come out. But if you're like, oh, it's connected to this multiverse and this happened to the original Batman on this particular day, or this happened to the original Captain America, but now there's another Captain America and he's wearing green helmet and the other one is wearing a flag, it gets a little confusing. It gets a little off the rails after a while. This is something that you need to be, if it's going to be done, it has to be tightly controlled and run pretty well. But if they're doing it with everything, it's going to go. I just think it's just going to go off the rails. Of course, I'm probably going to eat my words when Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. But right now, I think it's a bad thing in terms of how they're going about it. And in terms, hey, Crisis, what did I say before? Crisis, they had to do Crisis at least on a comic book level to rein in all the different type of of Supermen that were out there, you know, all the different type of stuff.
No,
you know,
no, that's not it. It's because Marv Wolfman was the top guy. It's an idea that they've been thinking about for a while of rebooting the whole thing. It didn't actually work as they originally planned, but they're like, all right, let's put it together. I think they also said they had a letter from some fan that sort of inspired it, but it wasn't like, hey, we can't understand these books. That's not why they're not selling. It was just like, hey, Marv is the top guy. We've got this thing we want to do, and they did it. And it was one of the big things for DC. At the end of it, there was the reality was the regular books that were there. And then
came back, yes.
Then 6 months later, you had Man of Steel, all this other stuff, Year One, Wonder Woman, and all this stuff trickling down later. But everyone looks at it because they closed the gap. And they said, oh, Crisis happened, then Man of Steel. Then all that stuff happened the same month. No, it's like almost a year later that they did Batman Year One. So
Cal, back me up on this, baby. Come on. Don't let Selecta go out like that.
I'm not name is not selected now.
Back you up on what? What PD said or what you're saying?
On what I'm saying, bro. What else am I talking about?
But didn't I already back you up a little?
Thank you. That's enough. You know. So you see a Selecta, you're wrong.
Way back.
Big time.
Way back.
Look,
I think I mean we're in agreement. I don't think doing the multiverse when you already have like a ton of characters for them to interact with. Why immediately go like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where Picard has to meet the other Picard, on Voyager, Janeway has to meet another Janeway, that sort of stuff. It's like I don't like. It's interesting a couple of times when they first did the Enterprise D, and it's like, wow, this is I'm into it because you weren't expecting it. But now you're watching it, we're telling you there's a multiverse, and you're not coming into it being like, oh, I didn't know this was gonna happen. They're spelling it all out. When the Next Generation did it the first time, it was like, oh, this is kind of cool. How did we get to this other one? And like, even though it was very cerebral, it was interesting, and that's one of the things that, even though like I think initially cerebral didn't work for Star Trek, like it really worked for the Next Generation in that scene. So now explaining to us and telling us every 2 seconds, and everyone speculating that this is what it's going to be, is kind of like, all right already. Like, I don't want to hear someone, and that's the thing I don't like in comics, when people spend the time, like, it's like when you have, like you hang out with people that weren't their high school friends, but you're not their high school friend, right? You hang out with them long enough, they'll think you were in their high school. In comic books, they're like, in your world, if you look like the same guy, they're gonna forget that you're from a different world. Because they're gonna be like, yo, you're just such and such. You're just Spider-Man. They're like, no, I'm from the other world. They're gonna forget. And that's the sort of conceit that people forget when they're doing these multiverse stories. But the guy looks sort of similar. Like I think the worst example, and I'm going on long, is the Savage Dragon. Because the Savage Dragon had a point where he was going from different worlds. And like the entire issue he looks the same as the dragon. And he said, your world, your world, your world, your world. It's like, stop. It's not real. In reality, I've been with people who have friends that have high school friends. I've been with them a lot. And they totally forget that I didn't go to the same high school they were. It's like, what? Didn't you? Like, no, I was not there. So, yeah.
In all fairness, Savage Dragon sucks. So that's not really the best example.
I'm using the worst example of it. So.
No, I mean, because there are examples where it works. But we all know, look, why do you want to do the multiverse? Okay, because it allows you to tell the same story, okay, but with a different character, with the same character, with this particular twist. And at the end of the day, you're not beholden to it. You can always say, oh, that was like this. That's like this mirror, like when they did the mirror episode with Star Trek. You know, you could do that one time. You're like, okay, good. And then we can just leave and we can go on. These people, unfortunately, and now we're going to keep, we want to keep this open and revisit it and do those particular things with it. And it doesn't necessarily work at the end of the day. But if it's, Into the Spider-Verse, that was executed very well. But a lot of people seem to forget That was a story about Miles Morales. That was not a story about the Spider-Verse per se. That was a story about Miles Morales. Okay, that's the anchor of that whole thing. We get to see the Bill Dungs moment of him, coming into his own as Spider-Man. That's the story. The other stuff sprinkled around, the other spider people that we see sprinkled around, that's the gravy at the end of the day. And everybody's obsessed with the gravy. Like, no, there was still a tangible and very well told story in that. Meaning, if you had taken out Gwen Stacy as Spider-Gwen and just made her like the love interest and had some other people around, you would have still had the story of Miles Morales and you would have been fine. You would have been absolutely fine with it. That's where a lot of people seem not to understand. You're bringing in the other characters, okay? That's supposed to be the gravy. What's the story? Why do we need to see this? Instead, they want to make the story, oh, let's bring in all these other characters. Like, no, that's not it. Crisis is not about, okay, we're going to bring in all these versions of Superman. Crisis is about, we got to defeat this guy. That's the story. Yeah. And the other stuff has to be the gravy with it. So if you're just going to go, we're going to give people gravy, nobody goes out to buy gravy. You have to give people an actual main course to go with at the end of the day. So hopefully they understand that, and we get that. Because the other stuff, that's just, yeah. And I see Michael Keaton as Batman again. To be honest, I really don't care. For a lot of other people, they live in 1989 and they're just never going to accept anything that comes afterwards. But for them, that's going to be great. For me, I'm like, hey, it's great if there's that's a plus if there's a good story. If not, I'm not paying 15, 16 or whatever amount the ticket is now to go see Michael Keaton dressed up as Batman when I can watch him as Batman for free on television.
Well, I definitely, because I totally agree with that. I just want to add one thing to it, is that the story that Cal is just mentioning also has these human elements to it, which is the hard thing to do, which is always forgotten about in superhero and comic stories for the big battles. And to have Miles Morales' connection with his father in there, and then Aunt May from the other times, or I'm not sure what time she was from, she has a connect with she's with the regular world, because Spider-Man had all that tech and all this other stuff in his world. Had this human moment between Miles and that, and then the uncle, all these sort of things. Then the uncle has the basic thing where the villain is your uncle, that sort of thing. So it had all these human elements to it, which weren't forgotten, him going into the school, that sort of stuff. And that's one of the things that gets lost when you keep trying to do 3 superheroes. So when you're gonna find time for Ned, or MJ, or any of those guys, even if, like you're like me and you're like, ugh. When do you get time for J. Jonah Jameson? That's the stuff we need in the story.
You don't, because you're right. You're 100% right about that, Cal.
You don't. Petey. Those become, I look at a Superman film, and every Superman film that I've seen for the most part has Superman, you have Clark Kent, you have Lois Lane, you have Jimmy Olsen, and you have Perry White. They're just about in every film. But after a while, I'm like, why do you have Perry White in here? You don't give him anything to do. He gets like the 20-second treatment. Same thing with Jimmy Olsen, he gets the 20-second treatment. So why are these guys there? And then they focus on all these other, you want to focus on all this other stuff. I said, but you've barely developed over the course of the films that you've had, with the exception of Lois Lane, of course, you've barely developed your supporting cast. You've got all these, and these are guys who have been around for so long, and they appear in every film. That means, okay, we're doing a Superman film? Oh yeah, we got to put Perry White in there. Okay, what are we going to give him to do? Oh, we'll just give him something gruff to say and that'll be the end of it. So why is he there? You've got stuff you've already developed, and Ned Leeds ended up being the Hobgoblin. So, that's one of the things where the fact they haven't wanted to tap that, but they haven't tapped that in the comics for a long time either. You would think that would be something. Okay, we can lead to that. You can even lay the seeds for that in this film, and then bring it up. Bring them over a little bit later. But developing what you have right there and all the stuff that it's at your disposal never seems to be as attractive as going for the shiny stuff that you think you can add in, and that's going to make the story. And it rarely does.
Good point.
Something else you were saying. What was it again? Yeah, a lot of those characters that should be developed end up being on the periphery. And they're on the periphery for characters. It's like the reverse. The characters on the periphery, let's bring those guys into focus, but there's a reason why they're on the periphery. They don't really contribute a lot to the story in terms of the main character. They don't. That's the reason why they're on the periphery. But they're shiny.
Right, but you don't think they help to support like the Jimmy Olsen? They don't help to support and the Perry White to support the story on Superman.
A good Superman story should have, for me, a good Superman story should, because you have the Clark Kent aspect, and that's all the Daily Planet. You want to understand why it is that Clark Kent and Jimmy Olsen get along and why Jimmy Olsen is Superman's pal. You definitely want the romance aspect between Superman and Lois Lane, okay? But Clark Kent is also someone who is very much respected by Perry White. And he respects Perry White because they're journalists. And there's been not one scene between Perry White, okay, and Clark Kent where they're actually exchanging ideas or some camaraderie as journalists. Not like boss and I'm telling you what to do, Kent. Now come over here and do it. If you read the comics,
I was gonna say that in the Superman, was it the Superman Batman? We had that. We had the with Lawrence Fishburne. I just wanted to chime in with that. We did have that gruffness. Clark Kent, go there and go to that hockey game or whatever the dumb thing you had him say. So sorry.
Yeah. You get that, but you don't get the stuff that says, okay, why is this guy? Perry White is not J. Jonah Jameson. He's not the guy who's just sitting there trying to, look, like let's get after Spider-Man. Perry White is very much, he can be avuncular, okay? He can be a father figure, and he's not paternal at the end of the day. So these are characters, okay, if you ask, why is Perry White in the movie? Or you could do the Scott Snyder treatment where we put Jimmy Olsen in the movie so we can have some quote unquote fun with him. It's gonna kill him, that type of stuff. But you have these other characters and you're not paying attention to them. And then you want to run off and go to the other universe. And in the other universe, what will they do? They'll make Jimmy Olsen Lex Luthor. And then Jimmy Olsen will finally get some light because he's a villain, as opposed to being Superman's pal. And we understand why the two of these guys get on so well.
Or the opposite, he becomes Lex Luthor's pal and then follows him into becoming the new Lex Luthor.
Exactly. Exactly that. Exactly that. And that becomes more interesting. And then everybody's like, oh, wow, but you never established why he's Superman's pal. Okay?
Well, that's one thing. You look at I remember in the old TV show, and I don't remember much. I mean, I have Perry in my mind, but I do remember at one point, wherever the story was obviously like Lois and Jimmy would be heavily involved in the story. At some point, they got Perry out of the Daily Planet and put him in there. And I think possibly in that first Superman movie with Superman and the Mole Man, he might be on scene too. So it's one of the things where if you're a storyteller and you're looking at this stuff, you should look at some of these older things and see how they weave these characters in. If you're not looking at the comic book, spend time like the same way Harv Burnett did with the Star Trek thing. Really look into it and see, well, how can I work this character in? And it's ultimately, if you do it's tough to say it with Superman 3 because Superman 3 doesn't utilize Perry that much or Lois, but it does have a strong human element with Lana throughout the story.
Yeah.
So, and that's the heart of the whole thing. Like I can still always watch that stuff and then like say, oh gosh, why?
That's a great example. I mean, behind the scenes, we don't get Lois Lane because she was having she was having some friction with the director and so on and so forth. So we don't see Margot Kidder as Lois Lane there, but you have a character like Lana Lang, where if you're a Superman if you're a Superman meter, you know about Lana Lang and her importance to the Superman mythos. And that film, you got great development of not just her, but even Clark Kent in terms of she digs Clark Kent. She's like, oh, Superman, hey, hi, oh yeah, thank you. Have you seen Clark?
Yeah, there's that, and she does the nice bits because there's so many points where Clark is trying to be bumbling, or is like I can't dance, or like he's like that, and she's not buying into any of it. Like she doesn't even, she just moves anything that's halfway, like trying to do that. She's like, oh, well, we're just dancing. Like he's trying to be like, oh, I don't know what I'm, and you can see her performance. She kind of just looks past the everything, and she's just like, hey, why, Clark, why don't you, settle down? Like that's something. She's just like not looking at him like saying, oh yeah, I know why you struck out, didn't you? Because you're a lame old like. She looks past everything.
No, Lois, Lana Lang was like, no. She's like, I don't know what this nonsense is you're doing, but you're gonna dance with me.
Yeah.
She's like, you're gonna dance with me properly. She's like, I grew up with you. I know you can do this. Get out of here. It was also good because he realizes with her he didn't have to do that. That was the part that she grew up with was a comfortable, normal thing that he could do that over there. Yeah. But again, I thought you just touched on something really good because you look at something like Spider-Man and there are all these different characters we've never seen, and they want to okay, let's race flip, let's gender flip, and you're like, but you got all these characters over here who are not even peripheral characters that you could bring in, and you would have no problem with it. You want to do something different? Bring in Glory Grant, okay, and let's have a relationship between Peter Parker and Glory Grant right over there. No, because the Mary Jane stuff, that's the canon stuff. You want to stay as close to it as possible, then do that. If that's what you want to do. But it's just easy. It's the easy lift. Okay, we can tell the same story with the same characters, with a little tweak and twist, and we can do all of this other stuff that we wouldn't normally be able to do with that character. And then at the end of the story, it doesn't really mean anything. We can go right back to status quo, just like if it was a what if, or an imaginary story, or an Elseworlds, and it's the laziest thing because this is a movie. It's not a comic where these guys need. So with comics, with them being serialized, help that you have to have on a monthly, some cases bi-monthly basis, where you might need another place where you can go and cut loose a little bit. But the films, there's a handful of films in comparison to how many comic book stories have been told, and for them to go this route is just.
Well, they've done it in some of the TV shows, when you take a look at it, like in the Smallville show, for example, where they brought in the peripheral characters and they've done more with them, developed more stuff. Like the Lana Lang is definitely far more developed than you would see in movies and in other shows and depictions that they have there. Like she was a pretty popular character. And she did call out Clark, try to hook up with Clark himself, but, because of his whole Superman persona, he could never tell her the truth and stuff like that. So.
They hooked up
eventually, but it didn't last. I mean, he's always faded for our boy, for our girl,
Lois Lane.
Lois Lane, or Double L as I like to call her.
That's a bad look. You forgot her name, Lois Lane.
Yeah, well, she's Lois Lane.
Bad look, Mars. Bad look.
Yeah. So I mean, overall, we're basically just saying that we think that the focus, especially on these movies, need to be more on the characters and the stories that are there, as opposed to broaden them out into the multiverse, where you're just really scrambling all these stories together. And I think that's what they're basically doing. They want to just say, hey, let's throw all these things together. What if we put, like you just said, put Spider-Man or Batman and change the way things are going, and it's a multiverse. He's not always going to be this way or whatever. And yeah, it's a great thing. Is for storytelling, it's one thing, but it really, I think after a while, will get the fans a little off, and take the story away from the main characters that we've all loved and grown with, right?
It's great for YouTube. It's great for YouTube speculation about what they could do, I guess, for eternity. But in terms of a story that at the most is going to be 2 hours on average, not very helpful.
Yeah. So, any last words about this Multiverse Madness?
Can't wait to see it.
Okay. So, Spinnerack?
Out.
Out.